is
Gaining Altitude.
Conversations worth navigating.
Welcome to episode 6 of Gaining Altitude, Conversations Worth Navigating. The term leader can be defined in many ways. The ability to influence, the ability to solve complex problems, the ability to drive value, I could go on. But at Delta Airlines, the very core of our mission centers on connecting the world through servant leadership, focusing on the well-being of the people and the communities that we serve every single day. That's the Delta difference. Today, we're honored to be joined by a leader who embodies the very definition of servant leadership, the president of an HBCU that is near and dear to Atlanta, the Delta family, and the world, Dr. Mary Schmidt Campbell of Spelman College. Spelman College is an HBCU and a global leader in the education of women of African descent. It is dedicated to academic excellence in the liberal arts and the sciences, and the intellectual, creative, ethical, and leadership development of its students. Under Dr. Campbell's leadership, Spelman has expanded its strategic partnerships and deepened its excellence in STEM, art, innovation, and technology, giving its graduates a competitive edge, all while creating dynamic world changers in the process. So join us for a powerful masterclass on servant leadership, closing diversity gaps, and leading through crises. And as always, we want you to be a part of the conversation with us. So please share any questions or comments you have for Dr. Campbell or Ed in the comment section on whatever platform you're using to view this live stream. So class is now in session, but don't worry, there won't be a pop quiz. And with that said, it's my pleasure to turn it over to our host for today, Delta CEO, Ed Bastian.
Well, thank you, Jamar, and Mary, we're really excited to have you, Dr. Mary Campbell Schmidt, or Mary Schmidt Campbell. I knew I was going to mess that up. I'm sorry. I just call her Mary, who's the current president of Spelman College.
Yes, thank you.
And it's an honor and a delight to have you with us. Mary has been at Spelman for 6 years.
It'll be 7 when I retire.
7 years, yeah. She's announced her retirement, so we had to get her while we could before she headed off to the exit. She has way too much to contribute, so we wanted to make sure we got this conversation. But Mary, prior to Spelman, had a long history in the arts and cultural affairs up in New York,
yes.
my hometown. And I understand you started in Harlem.
Yes, at the Studio Museum.
You were a curator for a museum, the Studio Museum, which became quite well known.
Yes.
Tough times in the 70s and 80s to do that. She was commissioner for the arts under both Mayor Koch and Dinkins,
yes.
In New York, and went on to NYU and took over the leadership of the I get the names right here.
The Tisch School of the Arts.
Of the Tisch School of Arts for quite a few years. And I know you incubated a number of new art and technology divisions within the school and the university as well. Mary's held leadership positions in the arts throughout our country. President Obama named her as vice chair of the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities in 2009. That must have been quite an interesting time.
It really was.
And Mary is also a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, director of Unity Technologies, and is a trustee for the High Museum here in Atlanta, the Getty Trust, and the Doris Duke Charitable Foundations. One of the accomplishments and things we want to talk about with you, Mary, is at Spelman, you launched Imagine, Invent, Ascend, a strategic vision to ensure that every Spelman graduate graduates with a competitive edge. And it's a strategic edge that you're looking for. And Mary also hosts at Spelman a series called Courageous Conversations, Black in the C-Suite. So kind of similar to what we're doing here, and we're comparing notes. Mary's going to be retiring in the upcoming year. Maybe she wants to be a studio host. I know I don't want to. I'm not ready for that quite yet. And very importantly, we have a large contingent of Spelman alum here who work with Delta, for Delta. Thank you all for joining us. I told Mary, I think this is the first time we've had a live studio audience. So it's quite an introduction. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation, Ed. Thank you for allowing us to share this with our Spelman sisters. It is wonderful to be here.
Yeah. So you grew up, and you've, not just yourself, but your husband as well, were college presidents for many, many, many years. So obviously education was something important to you.
Very.
And your family. Can you talk about your early education yourself, kind of how you got started in education and eventually into the arts?
My family really set the tone very early. You know, my father went to an HBCU, went to Cheney State, and his first job out of college was a janitor. By the time he retired, he was a family court judge. And he changed his life, changed his career through education. And so in my family, when we were growing up, it wasn't whether or not you were going to college. It was which college are you going to choose. And what was interesting for me is that I entered college in 1965. And as part of our history, that was in the middle, the height of the civil rights movement. And what people forget is that many of our colleges and universities were segregated, even up north. And the college I chose, Swarthmore College, had only accepted 1 or 2 black students a year. The year I went, there were 20 of us, and we were literally integrating the college. So it's been, to look back over 50 years, it really has been exceedingly interesting to see how higher education has changed and adapted to our desire to open this country up more.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and you're almost a living history book here that we're going to be able to look back on and share thoughts, because it's a live history, and
It's a live history,
and we're still trying to do
yes,
much of the same today.
Yes,
and
that's exactly right.
We're excited to have you here. So explain to me how you got into the arts. You know, one of the things that about arts that I know is true for many of us is that it's like travel, like what we do. It's a means by which people can get together. Can agree upon and find common ground and opportunity and interest and excitement. How were you drawn?
Yeah, that's a great observation. It's the means by which we express ourselves, which we share emotions, where we evoke history and memory. It's a wonderful place to be. So I was in undergraduate school, and I think this is one of the great arguments for college. I was in undergraduate school. I had never even heard of the term art history. And you know, you have to take some required courses, so I took an art history course, and I thought, this is fascinating. And so I took another one in which the professor required us to go to a different museum for every class, all up and down the East Coast. And so for a year, I was going to the Baltimore Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, the Philadelphia Museum, the Barnes Foundation collection, and it was if a whole entire world had opened up to me. And after I graduated, I actually went to live in Zambia for 2 years after I graduated. I got married and then went to live in Africa for 2 years. When I came back, I said, this is what I want to study. And I went to graduate school and got involved as a volunteer in a community folk art gallery that was in the area. Nobody paid us. We swept the floors, we cleaned the bathrooms, and we also hung the artwork on the wall and wrote the labels and wrote the little introduction to the exhibition. And one Sunday when we had an opening, the director of the real museum came walking in and said, do you think you could curate a show of an African-American artist? I said, sure, I can do that. I had never curated anything in my life. And, but I went to the museum, I sought the most senior curator there, and I said, I need your help. I can do this, but I need your help. And so we put together the show. It was a show of the artist Romary Bearden. I invited him to come and see it, and he came.
Wow.
With his wife.
Wow.
And 2 years after that show, he called me on the phone. He said, Mary, they have a job in New York. They're looking for the director of the Studio Museum. I think you ought to put your hat in the ring. And that's how I came to New York.
That's how you got there. That's awesome. That's a really interesting story. Well, though you rose quickly in New York to where you were in a position of leadership with the city's museum community and working for the mayors as a commissioner of the public arts. How that must have been unbelievable with all the incredible galleries and museums and opportunities that were there present then.
New York City has more funding for the arts than the National Endowment. National Endowment for the Arts. And not only do they fund the operations of museums and concert halls and ballet and opera and small arts organizations all over the 5 boroughs, they also help cultural institutions build. And so it was a great time to be in New York because New York had been on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yeah, I remember.
I mean, really on the verge of bankruptcy. And there were many small arts organizations that were, had anchored themselves in their communities in Chelsea, in Astoria, in Harlem, in the South Bronx, in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. And we realized that we could invest in those small organizations and they would become anchors for their communities. And so if you go there now to these very same communities and those same organizations, you can see how the presence of the artists, the vitality of the arts, was part of the revitalization of the entire city. So it was a very exciting time to be in New York.
Yeah. So how much time do you go back and you do that? You walk the streets and you go into the galleries or the boroughs, the neighborhoods. I've done that myself. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. You know, we spent Thanksgiving last year just going to one theater show after another, just one night after another. I could do the same thing with museums, just one day after another. So I've always appreciated the city because when they were at the lowest point, the mayor then, who was Ed Koch, for whom I worked later, said, "We're going to cut everything except culture." He said, we're going to, at the very least, we won't grow it, but at the very least, we're going to keep it because otherwise, what are we fighting for?
Right, exactly. Then you went to NYU.
Yes.
And you, academia, and you spent many years inspiring and creating programs and investments and setting the stage for the next generation in the art scene. And then you retire.
Yeah. Well, I was at NYU
yeah, I know you were there for a while. No, I understand. Quite a while.
I was there for 23 years.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Right.
And then what drew you to Spelman?
So I retired, and I really felt my husband had been a college president. He was retired. I was now retired. And we both thought, now we can just, have our rest time. And a few months after retirement, Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum, who was my predecessor at Spelman, gave me a call. I've never met her. I had never visited Spelman. And she said, we're planning an arts building. We're planning to build a new arts building. And I'd love to have you come to campus, talk to our arts faculty and our students about how we might organize ourselves as we're planning to build this building. I said, sure, I'd love to do that. And I came up. I walked onto campus, and all of the Spelman alumni who are here know this to be true. I walked onto campus, and people greeted me. They looked into my eyes. If I looked as though I were trying to find my way, somebody would come up and help me find my way on campus. I spent the whole day with the faculty. I was so impressed with how committed they were to the students, how committed they were to the college. And I left and I came back to my husband. I said, boy, that Spelman College is really something. And about a month later, I got a call recruiting me to succeed Dr. Tatum. I said, no, I'm retired. And they called many more times. And finally I said, look, I'm not going to throw my hat in the ring, but I'll come to Atlanta and talk to the search committee. Now, Spelman, when they were searching for the president, had a search committee with students, faculty, staff, community members, trustees. It was huge. And I got off the plane. They were meeting in a hotel by the airport. And I sat down in the room and I asked everybody in the room to go around the room and tell me why they were attached to Spelman College. Now, this is a room filled with Black people, white people, older people, younger people, male, female. I mean, it was very, very diverse. And what I heard was this passion for the mission, this sense of purpose, the sense of fulfillment they got. And by the time they all finished reciting their own personal narratives at the end, I was sitting there thinking to myself, I really want to be part of this community.
Yep.
And so I say to this day that Spelman called me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. We're fortunate that Spelman calls you, and we have you as a member of our community here.
Thank you.
One of the things, Mary, that we've been working on for some time here is our own diversity challenges and what we call closing the gap. And we know that's a gap. It's not just a gap. It's a never-ending opportunity to create more development opportunities, particularly for Black talent, where we have the biggest gap. And you've been an educator at Spelman with Black women, some of the brightest Black women, some of the smartest, some of the best minds, and created some of the best programs for Black talent. What can you, from the outside in looking at Delta, tell us about work we ought to be doing, can be doing, thinking about as to how we approach closing this gap and really trying to find ways to make sure that all of our talent is given the same opportunity?
Sure. I think companies work at many different levels. So there is the opportunity to partner with HBCUs. And we're finding that to get our students into internships early, to get them to really educate themselves about what's expected in the workplace and how they can become competitive in the workplace and how people work together in any given company or any given sector is really important. To understand what the sectors are about, that, you know, how airlines might be different from tech, which might be different from investment banking. Right. So we want our students to be able to experience these different opportunities very early on. And so we've made a huge push to increase those opportunities. And at the same time, we have begun a program where every year all of our sophomores will take a course that's part of something we call second year experience that will enable them to really understand how they continue to develop their soft skills to advance in any sector that they pursue. Once they get into the workplace, you know, we say to companies, everyone needs to feel that there's a place for them, that there's a place where they can grow, where they can develop, where they're going to have an opportunity to keep moving in that company. And so we had an experience recently where, can I say the name of another company? It's not an airline.
You can.
Okay. Where Ralph Lauren was approached by a Morehouse alumnus and a Spelman alumna. And they said to him, we don't really see a place for ourselves in the company. And he gave them the opportunity to design a whole collection that was based on archival research that they did on Morehouse and Spelman. They designed it, it's been launched, it is completely sold out.
Wow.
And what that said is that here was a company that was willing to open up space for the creative talent. They gave them the opportunity, they gave them the autonomy, they gave them the authority to be able to develop this, and so they were able to make themselves visible in the company, supported by the company itself. And so I think that's part of what companies also have to begin to understand. How do we create those opportunities within our company for everybody there?
Right, right. And one of the other things that you also at Spelman are so good at is investing in STEM
Yes.
opportunities.
Very
And
much.
we are fundamentally a STEM company. I mean, we think about what we do, and we put people in the sky. You know,
That's right.
Every day we have and we do it flawlessly.
Right.
But the engineering, the technology, the understanding the science, having a base of it's a big part of the product that we offer and that we provide. And that's an area where not just from a diversity, but just getting women
Right.
into our company, into those technical roles is something that we're continuing to push harder and harder because they've been dominated by white men
Yes.
for many, many years, decades, our entire history. What are your thoughts around that?
So Spelman is really singular and remarkable in that for 40 years, the college has placed an emphasis on developing Black women scientists. They developed, the faculty, the curriculum. They've understood the kind of cohort environment that really supports women and allows them to take strength from each other. They've been very aggressive about finding research opportunities for women, so when they get out of the classroom, they can get into these research laboratories and understand what the work of science is. And they are very good at providing other supports, like bringing other women in to show them what it means to be a woman scientist. So it's not only that we focus on their skills and being excellent scientists, we focus also on giving them confidence, on giving them a sense of being proactive, of speaking up, of being comfortable with their own voice in the room. And we find that those attributes are every bit as important as the academic attributes. Yeah. And I think because we've been doing it so long, I actually, we're very good at it.
I know you are.
I don't mind saying.
I know you are. And that's something that we need to continue to get better at, identifying, recognizing, creating the pathways for that future. So, as I mentioned earlier, you've been hosting your own podcast.
Yes.
And tell me about that experience and what has your objective been and what have some of the learnings for you?
So I say this is one of the silver linings of the pandemic, is that we wanted to keep in touch with our Spelman community while we were all sheltering in place. And so we came up with this idea of courageous conversations, Black in the C-suite. And we decided to focus on Black women who had successfully navigated the C-suite. Maybe they had been a CFO, or maybe they had been a CEO, or a chief marketing officer. So we wanted to bring them in and have a candid conversation. What was your journey to get to where you are? How do you deal with microaggressions? How do you balance your work and your personal life? And we developed a format that was a success right off the bat. So we've had wonderful people like Ursula Burns and Roz Brewer, who's our board chair, Spelman alumna, who's also the CEO of Walgreens Boots Alliance. And it's been absolutely thrilling because they have been so willing to open up to us. We let our audience throughout the entire conversation ask questions, so they get to have their questions answered. And we've been so pleasantly surprised by the hundreds of people, in some case thousands, who have tuned in to some of these sessions.
So what were a couple of the takeaways from that? What are some of the things that you picked up on as keys to success? Because we have a lot of Spelman alumni, but we also have a lot of other diverse talent watching this.
Yes.
Wanting to know what could I have taken, what can I take from that?
Well, there have been so many, Jims. Let me start with one. The one that I heard all the time that came from these successful women is that I learned how to bring my whole self to work. That is, they didn't feel they had to be a completely different person at work or put up a persona, that they could bring themselves, because that's what makes them successful. They can call on all of their strengths, all of their attributes, and figuring out how to be comfortable in that setting. That was very, very key. I remember Roz Brewer saying something that was very striking to me when they asked her about microaggressions. And she said, of course I've heard them. I hear them all the time. She said, there's probably not a day that goes by when I don't hear them. And do they make you? Sure, of course they annoy you or irritate you or angry. She said, what I've learned to do is take a step back, push the anger down, and bring the evidence and the data forward. And I thought, that's a really nice image. Push it down and bring forward the evidence and the data. And I liked that balance. The third thing they said, all of the women said, You know, everybody asks about a balance between work and life. It's that it never comes in full balance.
Right.
You're trying to maintain equilibrium, but there are going to be those times when work calls on you more and those times when family calls on you more. And you have to constantly be alert to that. But don't feel that you have to keep it in balance at every moment.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome. And I might add, Kathy Waller is
Yes.
on our board, and I know she's
That's
on
right.
your board. She's
Right.
she's a Spelman alumna.
No, she's not an alumnus. She's a trustee.
Or trustee.
And a wonderful
Trustee,
trustee.
yeah.
She's our co-chair
She's
of
a
the
trustee.
board.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I know she's affiliated with the school,
Yes.
and it's great that we share her.
Yes, it
we share
is.
her in common. I'm going to ask you one last question, then
Okay.
I'm going to turn, because we have our own audience
Okay.
chat going on, a little bit more of the personal side of you. And we were
Okay.
talking earlier. People may not know, but Mary's grandson plays for Atlanta United. And
Yes.
he's a defender, I understand.
Yes, he is.
And apparently he's pretty good.
He is.
Tell me about that.
So as I was telling Ed earlier, my grandson was 13 years old when he came to Atlanta. And my husband would get up at 5:30 in the morning to take him to his soccer practice, and then he became part of the Academy League. We were very proud of him, and and my husband would drive him all over, because my husband's retired. My husband would drive him all over, Georgia to get to his practice, and we all thought, oh, that's very nice. And we were very proud when he was ready to graduate high school, and he was offered a full scholarship to the University of Maryland. But I will never forget the breakfast we had in our home. As I said, my husband's was a college president. I am now, and we heard that they were offering him a contract for Atlanta United, and the two of us are sitting there. Oh, you don't have to go to college now. You can always do that later. But I think that was a very good choice for him.
Yeah.
He has first of all, he's 6'4" now. He's no longer a little scrawny teenager. And he plays with such grace and energy, and he's an incredible spokesperson for the team.
Yeah.
So I think he made the right choice.
So
And we certainly
what number is he?
32.
32. We'll be looking for number 32. And George is his name, is it?
Yes, George Campbell.
George Campbell. We'll be
Yes.
looking for George Campbell out on the field.
Right.
And next time we're over at the Mercedes-Benz. That's
Good.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to Jamar and Crystal for questions and chat and whatever you guys want us to take.
Fantastic. We've been getting a lot of engagement online on delta.com/gaining altitude, along with a lot of questions from our studio audience today. So we're really excited about that. We're going to start out with a rapid fire session. And so I'll ask a series of questions, and we'll kick it off to Mary first, Dr. Campbell, and then Ed, if you want to answer. So the first, if you had to live in any other country around the world, which country would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I love living in the United States. I have traveled a lot. I've traveled all over to Asia, to Africa, to Latin America, and I really love living in the United States. But if you press me, I think I'd probably like to try out Brazil.
So, Brazil. I'd live in most, again, only if I had to, because the United States is home for us, but I'd say almost any place in Europe. There's something about Europe that I always love being there, and maybe it's because my heritage sources from there, but almost any. I'd love to say Paris, but I'm not sure that's an easy city to live in, but any place in Europe would be great.
Mm-hmm.
So at Delta, we're really passionate about connecting the world and people and communities. And so what are you most passionate about and why?
I am truly passionate about education, and I'm passionate about making sure that education is equitable for everyone. And the story I always tell about that is that, when I first came to Atlanta, I had a group of principals from our neighborhood who came to have dinner with me. I invited them over. And at the end of dinner, I said, so what can Spelman College do for our neighboring public schools? Now, I had elementary, middle school, and high school principals. And 201, they said, teach our students to read. And I was stunned by that response. I was so stunned that I went back to our Department of Education, and we have a great Department of Education at Spelman. And I went back, and we have a specialist in family literacy. And we put together a literacy program, we call it Spell Reads, that sends about over 100 students out into these schools, 5th, 6th, and 7th grade at the outset, for personal tutorials. And over the past 3 years, we've seen the reading scores for those students who have been tutored rise by anywhere from 9% to 20%. Wow. And we just got a federal allocation to keep going and to expand that program. And I feel very strongly that our colleges and universities do have a commitment to invest some level of resources into making sure that the next generation is ready to come into college.
That's awesome. Good for you.
Ed, what are you most passionate about?
Well, other than Delta, which is what I'm pretty much 24/7. So whether I'm passionate or not, I have no time for anything else some days. But I am very passionate about our company and about our people. It'd be my children.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And the last rapid fire question before turning over to Crystal, talking about role models. Who was your first role model in your life?
Oh, that's easy. My parents. I feel so blessed because I had great parents. Mm-hmm. And as I said, education was everything. They did whatever they felt it took to make sure that each of us, myself and my 2 siblings, received the very best education possible.
Yeah, and I'd say the same. My parents and my mom, who Mary's a resident, grew up in Philadelphia. My mom grew up in Philadelphia. I was born in Philadelphia, but education was everything to her as well. And yeah, she's my role model, my hero.
Yeah.
Dr. Campbell, you spoke of great plans you had for retirement at one time. Those were taken off track by Spelman, and we're so glad they did. But now, what are your plans for retirement?
So my husband and I made a pledge to each other. We've been married 53 years. Mm. We made a pledge to each other.
53 years, oh, that's...
We made a pledge that I would accept nothing for at least the first year. That decision, so that I can make a kind of clean break with working. And we will, our formal residence will be Big Sky, Montana, and we'll move between Big Sky and New York City.
Sounds like you're going to be traveling a lot.
Yes.
On Delta Airlines, I hope.
I certainly will.
So you both lead companies and universities. Can you speak to how a university and a company should show up, specifically for their employees and students, when it comes to mental well-being? These past 2 years have been very trying for so many. And so can you talk to that perspective from your vantage point?
That is such a wonderful question, how we show up for mental well-being. I just had a small conversation on my front porch. I use my front porch as a place to convene, small groups. And I was talking to one of my faculty members and saying how hard it is for many of our workers who are facing the public and sometimes have to face responses to them that aren't always nice. You certainly have observed that with the airlines. And her response was, how do we respond? How do we help our workers take care of themselves as they have to care for the people they're trying to serve? I think that's a huge challenge that has emerged for all of us. It's a challenge for our students. Our students have been sequestered. Our first year students, for example, have been out of school as juniors and seniors as high school students. Even our students who are juniors now were evacuated from campus 2 years ago, so they never really got to have even a full year's experience on campus. What impact does that have on their sense of well-being? So it is a question we have had to ask ourselves and think about answering, because I don't think stock responses are available. I think we have to be very careful to think about it, reinvent responses, and be very observant about what our workforce and our students require.
I could not agree more, Mary. We are in such a different age these last 2 years. It's exposed the vulnerabilities of all aspects of society and personal. It's forced us to reflect and think about who we are, why we are, where we're going, why this happened. And it's also created an awful lot of angst and fear. So the emotional toll it's taken on so many people is, and we don't even have an idea the depth of it, right? We talk as if we know, but we really don't understand how pervasive it is. And I tell people, anyone who claims they weren't emotionally impacted by the pandemic isn't being truthful to them. It's not possible, right? Including ourselves. It's been really the marking period for many of us for probably our lifetime in terms of how we managed it, how we respond to it, how we emerge from it. At Delta, we are fortunate. We hired a fellow from the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Henry Ting, who helped us with the medical side of the pandemic and COVID, and he's a wonderful chief health officer, and he's become not just a medical doctor, but just a counsel and somebody thinks about joy and well-being as kind of that's what he loves to do, and that's what he's passionate about. And we've invested in resources, not just online and some of the classic resources. We've brought in some medical professionals onto our team to work with our team, because one thing that is very unique about our people is a lot of our people fly. And it's not, they don't even have a home place to come and collect themselves at the end of the day. And that sense of belonging that's so critical has really been taken away from so many. So I think this is something that will certainly be one of the things we come out of the pandemic, a much stronger company, and we'll be talking about it. Right? And this is not something 2 years ago. If we were asked that question, we kind of looked at each other, who has time? Right. And that's your problem, not mine. But it's our problem.
That's right. I couldn't agree more.
This next question is from Gloria, one of our customers, and she wonders, Dr. Campbell, how did your experience in the arts translate into leading an HBCU or any college?
I love that question, Gloria. One of the things that I discovered when I came to the Tisch School, Tisch School of the Arts is a conservatory. And what I discovered very quickly is that the way the arts were taught there was very different from my liberal arts education. And that is that students were regarded themselves not only as individuals, but as members of ensembles. So if they were making a film, they were part of a film crew. If they were making a piece of theater, they were part of the cast of the theater. Even if they were a solitary writer, if they were writing a television show, they were writing in a group setting. And so this notion of not only being an individual, but being part of the ensemble and relying and trusting on the ensemble, and trusting that the sum is greater than the parts as a result, is something that carried through with me in terms of leadership. And so we all come together once a week as senior leadership team members, and we create an environment where everybody can feel comfortable that they can say what's on their mind, they can disagree with each other. We have some ground rules. I call them the rules of play. Everybody has to be truthful with each other. If we make a mistake, we have to own up to it. We have to be kind. We have to listen carefully. We have to come with data and evidence. So we have some ground rules, but it enables us to think more broadly and in a much bigger way. So that's one principle. The other one is that at a college or university, and I'm sure in an airline, you have many different stakeholders, right? So we have faculty, we have students, we have parents, we have alumni, we have trustees. And so what I have learned over the years is that though it may take longer, you have to make sure that everybody is on board, and take care that you're not, just kind of barreling ahead without giving careful consideration to those stakeholders. They're important. They're stakeholders for a reason. They care about the institution. So that's been a very important part of leadership. And the third part is you have to make difficult decisions. Yeah. And so you have to make them. You have to be clear with people about them and honest with people. And you have to stand by them, even though people might start throwing you tomatoes and eggs at first. If you believe them, you have to stand inside of your decisions. And the fact that you can stand inside of those decisions actually is what brings people along in the long term.
That's well said. Very well said.
Dr. Campbell, many of our viewers may be new or still on the journey to learning about HBCUs. Can you provide an overview of HBCUs and its impact on American culture, history, as well as our future as a country?
Sure. I mentioned that my father was educated at an HBCU. In point of fact, at the end of the Civil War, when there were 4 million freed freed slaves, there really was no educational structure waiting for them out there. And they were called Negro colleges back then. Colleges like Atlanta University and Morehouse and Spelman and Cheney and Fisk and Howard began to grow up in that late 19th century period. And their principal role then was really to teach reading, so people could read the Bible, and writing, so they could write letters and do their transactional. But early in the 20th century, they very quickly came to begin the training of leaders. We've heard the term talented 10th, which is what Du Bois invented. And this notion that we have to take the responsibility to educate our leaders, to build our communities, and to begin to have an active presence as citizens. And so in the first half of the 20th century, historically black colleges and universities were responsible for producing the black middle class. There were no other opportunities for African Americans, or very few, I mean really very few, a handful, for them to get a college education. So historically black colleges and universities have provided the foundation for the absolute success of bringing this country closer to its ideal of equality. What happened, and I'll choose Spelman because I think it was so significant, after the Civil Rights Movement is when Spelman really decided that they were going to focus on black women scientists, that they said, okay, we're going to choose this field, just like Xavier chose to focus on black physicians. And we're going to become the premier place in this country for that. As a result, Spelman now, according to the National Science Foundation, produces more black women who earn PhDs in STEM fields than any other college or university in the country.
Wow.
And the same is true for Xavier, producing more black physicians than any other college or university in the country. So we have claimed this space in American culture where, were it not for us, we really would have an enormous or an even larger deficiency.
Yeah. That's a great little background for many of us to be reminded of.
Thank you.
Dr. Campbell, another question for you from a customer. As a well-traveled woman of color, the question is, have you experienced microaggressions? And you've already touched on the fact that sure, you have.
Yeah.
But for Delta as a company, talk to us about what we can do as travel professionals to alleviate those moments. And we of course hope none of those moments were with Delta.
So I said to Ed earlier, I said, the reason I am a devoted Delta customer, and I literally will do anything to make sure that I'm flying on Delta, short of you not just going there. but if
we don't fly there, it's probably not worth going.
You're probably right. But the reason is that because the service is so gracious at every turn. If I go into the Delta Sky Club, if I'm getting on a plane, if I'm making a reservation, it must come, congratulations, it must come from the top. There must be a tone set that says that we are going to give every customer the same level of service. Because, and that is one of the reasons I fly Delta. Because I know I don't have to put up with somebody surly or somebody who's going to cut me short, or you know, and so it makes a difference, and it's good business.
Yeah.
You know, because why wouldn't you treat everybody that way? It's a service industry, and so I'm happy to say most of my travel experiences have been quite wonderful.
Well, thank you, Mary. And we had this conversation earlier today when we had lunch, and what I shared, because Mary, you know, offered that without even me asking, and she said, "I want to meet who's in charge of your customer service training," and we have amazing teams involved in training and the continued investment in relationships and how do you bring the best of yourself to the best of your customer. But the one thing I said to Mary also, though, is that we have amazing people that hire for service. You know, you have to have a heart that wants to serve in order to be successful here at Delta. And we'll train the airline business, the technical aspect. You know, we can do a lot of training, but you can't train a heart.
That's true.
And that's the thing I love about our company. I love about our people is there's one thing about our company that runs consistent from top to bottom, across, sideways, up and down, is it's about a heart for service. And when we hire people, we look for that as to how they've demonstrated that or how they relate to that question. So so thank you for that, and we're going to continue to make sure we hire for talent that's service oriented and train the technical aspects around it.
We've got one loyal customer here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, part of being a leader, obviously, is also being able to navigate times of crises. And what did you all learn through the COVID crises? And more specifically, how do you ensure that the conversation on DE&I continues throughout many crises, right, as this country goes through a pandemic and might be economic crises? How do you ensure that DE&I is also part of the conversation throughout all of that?
So it became very clear to me very quickly that in a time of crisis, a leader takes on a real symbolic value. You become the face of Delta. I become the face of Spelman College, which means you also are, the expectation is that you're also expected to understand some of that emotional angst that's bubbling up. And you have to be prepared to acknowledge that. And you have to be prepared to acknowledge the fear, the uncertainty, but you also have to keep a sense of optimism. Yes. That we will cross this bridge over troubled waters, that this too shall pass, yes. That we'll come out of the ark in 40 days. I mean, whatever images you need, but you have to have this sense of our prevailing in the end. And you have to be very clear that this is not going to be easy, and that we may hit this rock and we may hit this obstacle, but if we link arms, if we're together, we can prevail. For the DEI conversation, it happens that as I mentioned, I do sit on boards that have that are predominantly white institutions. And in fact, that issue bubbled up, and it certainly bubbled up after the summer of 2020 with the death of George Floyd and the kind of racial reckoning that our country awakened itself to. And I think it is extremely important not to relegate the conversation about DEI to just crises. It's got to be part of the ongoing mission of whatever company or organization makes it that centerpiece. There have to be clear goals and objectives for bringing people into the company, for having people develop in the company, for having them move up in the company, for having them be able to participate in a meaningful way. I think DEI has to be part of the DNA.
Yep, I'll completely agree, Mary. We, shortly after the summer of 2020, the reckoning, as you referred to, rightfully so, and it was a vulnerable period for us. We felt exposed on lots of levels. Our instincts were to protect at Delta, and when I asked our team, their thoughts about what we'd all been through, what we were watching, because the world stopped, and we were forced to watch whether you didn't want to or not. There's some pretty interesting facts that came to light, facts that we hadn't talked a lot about where the gaps were, about representation not being what it needed to be. And we made a commitment to be very transparent, and we are transparent at Delta, and accountable to closing those gaps. And it's not going to happen overnight. And by the way, it never stops. You're always trying to get better in whatever aspect of that, because we want to bring everybody forward with us. And I'm glad, that we're now in year 2 of that we're making good progress. But one of the reasons we're making good progress is because we talk about it, and we set that goal, and we're publicly transparent about what we're trying to do. And it's not easy. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of people that wonder why is this, is this the most important thing you do? It's not, though. It's an incredibly important thing to do. There's a lot of important things we do. And but if we can come through COVID and a pandemic, we can come through this too.
Sure.
Right? And if we take that same level of energy, and I love your definition of leadership through the crisis, because I completely subscribe to that's what I tried to do very much myself, is in a period of fear and angst, is you try to absorb as much of that. I've watched many leaders during this period kind of look like they're losing their mind sometimes, or it's visible on them, and it's wearing on them. And there's an emotional and a human transparency that we have to have, but if you're not providing the optimism, who's going to want to follow that person?
That's
right? So you have to absorb, and it's hard. And by the way, I don't know that we really understand what we've absorbed yet.
Right.
And we're still we're have to figure that out, because we've got to release it somehow. And I know I haven't released it all the way yet. But we've got to absorb for the organization the stress, and turn that into confidence, honest confidence, acknowledging the challenge that's ahead of us, but leading the way through the darkness.
Right.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I'll just note that there's so much engagement online with our customers and employees. We're seeing hashtag Delta Proud, hashtag HBCU Proud, so lots of pride in this convo. I'm going to end with one last question that we ask all of our guests, and then I'll let Ed share some remarks. And he has a surprise that he'd like to share with you as well, so I'll let him get on that a little later. But how do we, as a company, and just our folks that are tuning in today, how do we better connect with the world?
How do we better connect with the world? Say a little bit more about what you mean by that.
So our mission as an organization is really connecting. I mean, we do it physically through our planes, but also these conversations, we're connecting and bridging gaps to understanding and connecting communities. And so a lot of people tuning in want to know how they can do their part to connect the world. And so as a leader of Spelman, what would you say to your students, or to also the Delta folks listening, on how we can find our way to connect the world?
For Spelman, it is a requirement that our students do community service. I mean, they have to do a level of community service. Now, there are some organizations on campus that do a lot more, but it's because we want our students to understand, and all my alumni can back me up on this, that you're acquiring this education not only for yourself, you're acquiring it for what it can do to build your community. So, and it's no surprise that, you have a CEO like Roz who comes out, or Stacey Abrams who comes out, who understands very well how to translate that into her community service. So I say that to say it's got to be part of the mission of what an organization sets out to do, to connect people, and to invite the employees and the people who work, for us it's the workforce, it's the students, to share with us how they feel they want to connect. Because everybody has a different motivation for connecting and connecting to different communities doing different kinds of work. So I think it's that kind of opportunity to have community conversations about connecting, because that connection becomes part of what the work is about.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed our connection today that we've spent for the last hour communicating our thoughts and our visions and our hopes and dreams and opportunities, learning from you, Mary. Thank you for your wisdom and sharing yourself with us. Jamar's right. We want to acknowledge your presence and the leadership you've provided our community by making a capital contribution to Spelman.
Oh my goodness!
You are, I know, in the process of working on the Center for Arts and Innovation.
Yes.
And we're contributing $2 million.
Oh my God, I'm going to cry. Oh my gosh. Oh.
Well, it's our pleasure, and there could not have been a more perfect introduction than the last hour as to why we want to do that. So
I don't cry, but you're making me.
Well, we're happy you cry, but it's
Thank you.
But it's important. Our foundation not only loves the Spelman relationship we have with many of your alumni here and the people that in this community appreciate what you do, and we want to continue to foster and building that relationship tighter and tighter.
So I have to tell you this: that gift closed the capital campaign for the building.
I didn't know that.
Yes, 100%.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
And I have to say, I love your shoe game.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
I think I've been outdone.
And I like you.
I think I've been outdone. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
so
being
much.
with us, Mary.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. We have our groundbreaking April 29th. You have to be there.
I'll be there.
Oh my gosh. Wait till I call Roz. I can't wait. As soon as I get out of here, I'm going to pick up the phone and call her.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This was wonderful. Oh, I enjoyed. Did everybody enjoy that? Yeah. Oh, I so enjoyed it. Thank you, Jamar. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. She has more to do. Sorry.
It's a great surprise for everybody.
Okay.
Thank you to our employees, customers, and communities for joining us for our 6th Gaining Altitude. We hope to see you at our next episode. In the meantime, you can also catch Ed's previous conversations on Gaining Altitude with Mary Barra and Porter Braswell on board your next flight in the series section of Delta Studio. Please share your feedback and get the latest updates on delta.com/gaining altitude. And take care.